evening and welcome to this Thursday, August 18th, 2022 regular meeting of the College Township Council. If you would, I invite you to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Recording in progress.
We will open the floor to anyone wishing to speak to the council regarding anything not on this evening's agenda. Seeing nor hearing none. Do any council members have any potential new agenda items for this evening? Hearing nor seeing none, we move right into reports. Manager's update.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Several items to update council on this evening. With respect to the solar power purchase agreement, I just received at 4:59 this afternoon an update, a detailed written update from Randy Brown, excuse me, State College Area School District, who is chairing up and leading that effort related to the SPAA. It's an actual multi-page document, so I just wanted council to know that that document will actually be part of the packet for our next meeting on September 1st. So that, I think it's a very thorough update and gives a revised timeline and time frame in terms of receipt of the RFP, et cetera, et cetera. So that coming in very late, I just wanted to be sure that everyone knew that we had that and will update accordingly. Moving on, I did also want to report with respect to the Thompson Woods Preserve and the efforts there for the intermunicipal agreement. Received good news from Borough Manager Tom Fontaine earlier this week. The borough actually adopted the intermunicipal agreement and all the corresponding resolutions. So at this point, without changes, so at this point, we had reviewed that particular document. We felt it was complete and we had forwarded it on to the borough prior to any adoption on our part. They have now gone ahead and adopted it, so that'll be coming back to you as council again at the 9/1 meeting for final adoption. So my understanding is there were no changes that were made to the document. So everything that you have seen before should still be in place. I also wanted to mention with respect to the path of campus, and Mike, feel free to chime in. We were contacted by one of the reviewers for CFA. We do need to provide additional letters of support from all the impacted property owners. We typically, and I'll let Mike speak to this if he chooses, typically we're not required to do that, but we did have a letter of support from Penn State, who is the owner of approximately 75% or so of the property that would be impacted by the path to campus walkway. But this is an additional request that has been made. Mike, I don't know if there was anything additional that you would like to add.
No, beyond what Adam had already said. This came in as of yesterday. We were made aware yesterday afternoon by DCED. They gave us through the end of the month to provide those letters, and at this juncture, obviously Penn State's the largest individual property holder along that stretch. We're talking relatively small stretches throughout here, so we're going to talk this week and make those contacts and see if we can get those letters secured and sent on to DCED so they can continue with their review. But as Adam alluded to, as part of the PennDOT application, they weren't required. This is a wrinkle with the DCED CFA application that we tried to explain in the application, but it wasn't enough justification. So we'll move forward.
Thanks.
With respect to the proposed casino project for College Township, there was an update back in July 25th, actually, that had not made it onto the printed page. But that was the Pennsylvania Gaming Control Board order that was detailing a deadline for petitions to intervene in the proposed SC gaming license application that may be issued. And that deadline is set for 8/26 of this year. So later this month, there's a deadline for a petition to intervene. In a corresponding news article, the most likely interveners that were identified would be the same parties that were involved in the lawsuit with respect to the challenging of the appropriateness of the awarding of the license. The other item that I wanted to mention to council is obviously, as you can see by reviewing your packets this evening, we have a great deal of correspondence pertaining to the casino. And I just wanted to make council aware, as a result of all of that ongoing citizen correspondence and the concern about a proposed casino, staff has reached out to the township solicitor to provide additional clarity on various procedural items. So I'm anticipating that we will have that actually relatively soon. And once we do receive that, that update will be incorporated as part of the packet, probably under manager incoming correspondence, again, for the next meeting on September 1st.
Great.
So those are the items that are listed on the manager's update. And the only other thing I wanted to remind council is late this afternoon, all of members of council received a draft set of comments pertaining to the COG program plan and CIP. And I would certainly appreciate your review of that, take a look at it. If there are any clarifications, changes that need to be made, anything that we may have missed, please let me know as soon as you can. I'm already late, and I'd like to try to get that out the door to COG Executive Director by the end of the day tomorrow. So, Mr. Chair, that's all that I have, but I'll be happy to try to answer any questions.
Great. Questions for the manager? Eric?
There's at least one more municipality behind us, if I understand from our meeting this morning. So they've already been submitted? All right, never mind. Every property owner meaning every property owner along the route who we may need an easement? Fine, okay.
Yeah, there's, I believe, 4 beyond Penn State, so.
Do we anticipate any of them will not be particularly fond of the idea?
We don't, however, in order to properly convey all of the concepts, there's some additional work, and I know that staff is going to be meeting probably early next week to do some additional visualization drawings, if you will. I mean, there's almost some preliminary, very preliminary type engineering work that we need to do, identifying the breadth of the right-of-way that would be involved.
Just how
in it.
much they have to agree
Exactly,
to.
and so I think that in fairness to those property owners, while it's been very apparent what we're talking about and where we're talking about it, we have not approached those beyond Penn State at this point, obviously because they had the lion's share of the property involved. We needed to ensure that they were comfortable with the project. But most of this area is within the right-of-way, but nonetheless, that's still property that they have control of, and we need to be sure that they understand what the project is and basically the meets and bounds of that. So we'll need to put some things together.
Is there any chance they're all local property owners as opposed to a company in some other part of the country who may not have any interest?
They're all local in terms of, I believe, regional ownership in terms of beyond Pennsylvania. I don't believe there are.
Just that they might have understand the bigger picture better and be a little more understanding of.
The properties that we're talking about are the Room Doctor property, Lifelink. We're talking about the former Damon's or former Letterman's property, and I believe the last one is the
Hotel?
carpet.
Historical Society.
Esper and the Historical Society.
Well,
So
just
some of those are pretty benign then, I think.
Yeah, absolutely, they are.
Good. One other comment. The agreement with the borough. Were we the beneficiaries of it being on the same agenda as their short-term rental discussion?
I believe we were.
It was on the consent agenda.
Yeah.
I believe we were. I do know that they had previously discussed it at one of their work sessions, and apparently any questions that had come up were able to be answered by borough staff. So I think that helped quite a bit, but yes, the fact that it was on the same evening as the short-term rental.
It's too bad we couldn't find something else we've been waiting on them to deal with and give it to them at the same meeting. But,
True, it's true.
So following up on Eric's, just the hotel property is separate from the Letterman's property. And then there's the Esper property. And what about Center Furnace? Is
Yeah, that would be one as well.
You mentioned Center.
Well, the Center for, I assume that that was also encompassed by the Historical Society.
Okay.
Yeah, there's, like I said, there's approximately 4 or 5.
Okay,
that
all
we
right,
need to
we
work
just
with.
don't want to miss one.
And I have a follow-up question to that as well. I mean, not that we need to do this in this case, but, or would want to, but hypothetically speaking, can't we require a sidewalk?
Sure.
Yeah, okay.
And a couple of the properties already have sidewalks, so I
Right.
think the argument,
Yeah.
you know, they may get
Okay,
a new
so
sidewalk.
there's not a whole lot of,
Yeah, certainly the goal is a negotiated
Friendly neighbors and
easement
negotiate, sure.
But yeah, there are other mechanisms available. They're just not,
But we're
top
also on a
priority.
short.
but we're
time.
not gonna be held up on this entire path because.
Well,
Yeah.
we certainly hope not. And to the point that was just made, some of you may recall that LifeLink has an obligation to actually complete a sidewalk across their frontage along College Avenue should and when, if or when, the property adjacent develops. And so this is an opportunity for them to basically be relieved of that responsibility. So I generally don't believe that it's going to be difficult, but I do think that we have some due diligence that we need to do in order to properly represent to the ownership what's going to be involved.
Other questions for the manager?
I have
Paul,
one other
please.
question. Back to the casino comments that are coming from the solicitor. Is that in response to trying to update the FAQ and those sort of things as well? Or is it gonna come through us first? I mean, I'm just kinda curious what the nature
In
of
part,
those
but I
are.
think it was simply out of the abundance of correspondence we had received and the repeated themes of that correspondence. We wanted to, and these were questions that had been previously addressed by the solicitor or other entities, but we've asked for a revisitation.
An update.
For example, there had been, originally, Act 42 was adopted and actually signed into law on October 30th of 2017. But there was a modification that impacted Act 42 that was related to these Category 4 licenses that came at a later date, actually, that occurred in May of 2019. So there are some things, we just want to be sure that various elements of procedure are properly captured so that they can be conveyed both to council and to the public.
Great. That's, yeah, that was the comment last week. We
Carl,
appreciate that.
Anything?
Right, well, just that council's asking, I believe council members are asking these questions of staff, you know, independently, and we need solid answers, and, I really appreciate the forward momentum on that.
Right, and if you would, just indicate that we're working on an FAQ, if you could add that. on the-
Yeah, absolutely. In response to the conversation that we had
At last
at the
meeting.
last meeting, yeah, we're going to be making updates. Mike has already taken some steps that I believe if you looked online today and went to the casino information that is available on the College Township website, he has reorganized a number of those items. All the correspondence, for example, to date that had been there has now been all located in a centralized spot so that it can be easily identified and accessed. So I think that things are coming into shape, but part of all of that is the update of the FAQ and any additional information that we have. Mike?
I just had it up, so I'll just
there you
show
go.
council what was done today, just so you're aware. Everything that was there is still there. It's just reorganized in a little bit different manner. Talks a little bit about, you know, the kind of same introduction, but then also references specific parties that are involved. So the casino developer, College Township, there it goes. And it's not going to scroll for me there. There's the listing of actions and correspondence received, as well as PA Gaming. Same thing, an introduction and the kind of procedural elements that they've taken place. It's just a reorganization, and it's setting the stage for answering some of those additional questions that
Excellent.
we've talked about.
Excellent. Anything else on manager? If not, we'll go to our COG Regional County Liaison. Carla, have you had any since last we met?
Yes, we had a meeting with the Millbrook Marsh Boardwalk revitalization project this week, and it's gonna be expensive. So I'm just gonna give you the highlights, and Amy can jump in with anything I miss. But previously, we had talked about not looking at a phased approach because that gives us all just like a lot of heartburn, just the word phasing these days, in an effort to really just get the project done and see what we could do. But with the timeline ahead of us and the potential cost factor, and after looking at the COG budget, frankly, I did propose we retake a look at the phased approach. Pam Salakangas with CRPR and Melissa, that's right, Melissa with Millbrook Marsh, admitted they had already been talking about it. Really, what we need to do is keep the marsh relevant to our constituents and to the neighboring municipalities. We want it usable to some degree, at least, while we figure out the long game. So instead of proposing to squeeze it into the 2023 budget, which kind of got thrown out there briefly, we requested that there be they do pull it out into maybe a phase 1 and a phase 2, giving Melissa of the Millbrook Marsh, I think she will have a solid understanding of what the primary and most important corridor to be worked on would be. So I mean, there's still discussions to come out of that, but all around, I think it was pretty well received as far as see what we can do. There's been a lot of movement as far as archaeological study, right? Phase A was
1A, yeah.
1A.
Will require a 1B.
Will require a 1B based on their findings.
Yes.
They expect to find something like 1,000 artifacts in the area. I mean, we went through this with the Put in Town bikeway, and we know how long that takes. So, I mean, we can dream about 2024, but I don't even see it really for a while past that. Go ahead.
Yeah, the one thing they did kind of recommend, and it's not a bad idea, is budgeting for the design 1 year.
Oh, right,
So that
yeah.
way you're ready to go with construction dollars the following year. Instead of waiting and trying to budget all at one time and then, now we've got to get through design and bidding and then only go to construction, you're probably going to be into another year anyway, so.
Do you know when Pam was thinking about putting that budget request in? Was that for this budget cycle or next?
I think it'll be next.
Yeah.
I think so, because
Yeah.
she's already due with hers, she said at
Right.
the end of August, so
Yeah.
we don't even have any kind of good number at this point.
Right, okay, good.
So.
I did request, I threw out that CRPR has a lot of budget requests on 2023, and giving, I kind of also threw out, like, giving us a year's heads up about what to expect coming down the line is a great way to, I think, earn elected official buy-in. Just let us know what's coming down the pipeline. So I think we're in a good place as far as just planning and communication. Maybe not as far as execution anytime in the immediate future.
Well, the other part, if they have the design shovel-ready, it's a
Right.
shovel-ready
Oh,
project.
for sure.
Exactly.
I mean,
That
so,
puts us that far.
Well, and for fundraising as well, that
Right.
Melissa mentioned as well.
Exactly.
right,
So that
and
helps.
Grants, fundraising.
right, part of the piece of not wanting to do that originally is that there are grants that will fund the
Design.
design and the project, but we're just gonna have to put that chicken before the egg, or maybe the egg before the chicken. I'm not sure. We're gonna have to pay for one of them
There's
now.
carts and horses, there's all sorts.
So that's it for me, thanks.
Questions for Carl?
Real quick question. The archaeological impact studies and those kind of things, those are being conducted and funded now? Or
Yes.
are those just?
Yes, they were a part of the report, or when they went into the next phase with Land Associates, all those little, what were 7 steps that she kind of went over each one of them?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm familiar with, I just wanted to know if that was progressing or if that was out in the
Yeah,
future.
now, I don't know about Phase 1B, but I do know what was done already has been funded.
Yeah, my recollection is that Phase 1A was part of the proposal.
Right.
That was fully funded
Right.
for land.
Mhm.
The 1B, I'm anticipating is an extra.
Yes, you would have
And
believed that.
so, because they knew without hesitation, there would have to be a 1A.
Right.
And so, I think.
There's a couple of pretty well-known sites right along that area. So.
Right, well, and actually, I want to throw out one other thing. I guess, I don't quite understand it all, but I guess there is currently something before Congress with DEP for them to not require all of, I don't know, all of the studies,
Yeah, I'm not completely up on.
all
up
of
to
the
it, but it was something like that.
permitting studies to replace an existing structure in this type of area.
Right.
Currently, if you want to replace an existing structure, you need to go through all of the DEP permitting.
As if it was new.
Right.
Correct. There's something before the state right now that's just been sitting there, apparently. No idea when it will move forward to waive that. And I reached out to Pam for some additional information. She says Jerry will probably
Yeah, he's the
know.
one that definitely knows it all.
Right, know
He
more
was
about
looking into
it.
that when even before we started, what were we gonna have to do with DEP?
And if that goes forward, then our process gets cheaper considerably and quicker. And so my thought was maybe a PSATS resolution before the Center County Association of Township Supervisors. Yeah, that was just one other piece.
Great. Any other questions for Carl? If not,
Just a comment.
Yeah.
I know my heartburn over phases is that we tend to not see phases 2 and 3
Right,
ever completed.
right.
You know, we're waiting forever, so yeah. Understand the concept, but
Right, but a 4 million plus boardwalk's a hard
understand. Yeah. There's the practical
hard
aspect.
sell, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Eric, since last we met, any
Yeah.
of yours, and then.
Well, I
How about this
apologize.
morning?
I sat in for Carlo on the CAS meeting.
Thanks.
And it was today, as I was doing some last minute stuff, I realized I never sent a report out. So I sent it out. I think I'll just read it so we can get through a lot quicker. There was 2 items that are worth sharing with the group. The first was the PA Clean Energy Digital Platform. Jim Wiley, the Vice Chair of the Westchester Borough Sustainability and Advisory Committee and member of the Westchester Area COG Clean Energy Future Steering Committee, outlined for the CAS Committee the website they developed, showed it on a PowerPoint. The website serves as a resource for communities in Pennsylvania that have developed or are developing climate action plans or energy transition plans. That's us. The COG was invited to join and participate this group that he's put together, either as a platform contributor or both a platform contributor and a member of the platform steering committee. After quite a bit of discussion, neither one of those cost any money, by the way. After quite a bit of discussion, the motion passed unanimously to join just as a platform contributing member. And then I have the website listed here in the report. It's just www.pacleanenergy.com. As a platform contributing member, already anybody has access to the resources that are posted out there. So it's a great clearinghouse for the collection of what people have learned and what people are doing in Pennsylvania along these lines. So we don't have to reinvent the wheel. Everybody doesn't have to reinvent the wheel. now that we're a platform contributor, we can participate either in the question and answer thing or posting our own experiences. As a platform steering committee member, which we did not vote to support, involves a little bit more effort, and we didn't feel that staff had the time at this point to commit to that. So the second thing that we talked about, and I suspect Carla will agree with me, that we should add an agenda item in the coming months to discuss, because the second agenda item there was the regional refuse and recycling contract schedule for the 2025 contract. So the committee reviewed and provided some comments on the draft schedule for awarding the 2025 regional refuse and recycling contract. The schedule allows for a decision to be made at least 1 year in advance of the award to give the successful bidder adequate time to ramp up in preparation. That was the first question, is how come we're starting now for a contract that we're not going to award till 2025? Well, they want to award it in spring of 2024 in the event that it's somebody who needs to buy trucks, hire people, and that kind of stuff to give them enough lead time. One of the things I guess they found out last time was some potential responders didn't respond because they would have had enough
Correct.
time to ramp up. So that was the big change
Yeah.
in the process. Highlights from the schedule. Contract specifics will be discussed at the September CAS meeting. That would be the next one. Okay. Issues, concerns, and feedback from the member municipalities, of which we are one, will be finalized at the October and November CAS meeting so that they can be factored into a resident survey. The draft RFP will then be finalized in October of 2023, a year from now. The RFP solicitation would then go out the beginning of the following year, January 2024, with anticipated bid award at the April General Forum meeting. The reason I suggest that we might want to have an agenda item on this is that we need to provide Carla with feedback, anything that we would like to see considered, changed, required, etc., in the next RFP. The only thing that came to mind, and this meeting was not the meeting to talk about those kinds of things, but as an example, Carla and I, at least Carla and I, have both been contacted by residents on private streets who don't get refuse and recycling service during inclement weather, icing, snow, in part because maybe the grade on the street, the design of the street. I think it's mostly private streets, but it could be a public street. And there doesn't seem to be a mechanism in there that requires them to provide that service. There seems to be the ability for the service provider to just say, I can't get up the road.
Lenape Lane.
What's that?
Lenape Lane.
Well, I didn't hear that.
Lenape Lane.
Lenape.
Yes.
Lenape, and
Yeah.
over and
Right.
over and
Yeah.
over again.
Yeah.
I know that I was contacted, I thought Carla might have been contacted by more than one resident. And we have a former council member who also lives on a street that
That's the one I
falls
was
into this
thinking of,
category. Oftentimes might go weeks without refuse or recycling service. So I don't know what the answer is, I don't know how to address that, but I know that we couldn't even get a timely response from them when this happened before. And COG didn't feel like they had much leverage under this contract. That might be something we might want to collectively take forward and try to address on behalf of our residents. That was it for that meeting. A couple days later, we had our fourth MPO subcommittee meeting on the bill legislation. And you recall I've been telling you we have a subcommittee put together to try to figure out what we should do, and we finalized a staff recommendation that will be taken to the tech committee in September and then the full MPO. And it really addresses 4 areas. The first of it is what should we do? In other words, there's this unprecedented amount of transportation funding. What should we do about it? Should we do nothing? Should we just sit back and say, well, hey, we'll take some additional revenue coming our way through increased formula, and that's it. The second thing is, if we are going to move forward, and we did come up with a recommendation on what we think we should do, the second part of it is, how do we come up with the resources to do this? As I think Mike and Adam will agree, researching, applying, and managing grants is very labor intensive. Just had a discussion about what we have to do tonight over just one small grant. And the third thing then would be, if we go down this road, if we decide to invest the resources and go after some of this discretionary money, who makes the decisions about how those resources are used? Discretionary money will in some part be used to finance large projects that we as a MPO don't have the resources to finish. State College Area Connector, Interstate 80 interchange, both of those do not have a funding commitment. They have funding commitment for engineering and design. I-80 has it for the first phase of construction, but not the second and third. So this is an opportunity to go after, if we need to, funding for large projects, but then also to backstop some of the projects that we as individual municipalities are maybe going after individually, or individual projects that we want that are just big ticket. We would have the regional staff resources. And then the fourth item that is included in our recommendation is there anything that the MPO should be doing to lay the groundwork for future efforts? And the answer to this is by coincidence, luck, good planning. MPO is about to undertake a strategic plan effort. We got a planning grant to do that. So I think those two efforts dovetail nicely, because the recommendation we're going to make to the MPO is that we as an MPO need to invest in additional full-time staff folks, some combination of that and some consulting support. And we know firsthand, College Township, as maybe sometimes as distasteful as that seems, to have to pay somebody to go after tax dollars, it works. It's just the way of the world. So then the question then becomes, on that last one, is this might change the way the MPO is structured. This may change the way the MPO local funding is provided, and all of those things can be discussed and we think hashed and vetted out and determined alongside of this effort as we go through the strategic plan. So I bring this up now because we're going to the full MPO with a recommendation that they support this, and we're talking about something in the area of $500,000 investment in either staff or some combination of staff or consulting time, and that has to be paid out of the MPO budget. How that's divided up yet, we haven't figured out. Some portion of it will likely come from the local municipal shares, which, coming on the heels of our COG budget discussion, can be a sensitive issue. This is a little bit different in that this is money used to leverage millions of dollars. So depending on how you see that, your attitude or your willingness to make that investment may change. But we don't have those details yet. We're kind of waiting to see what we get back from the tech committee and the MPO meeting, big picture, and then we'll ask staff to roll up their sleeves and come up with some more granular data on how we expect that to be funded. We anticipate that some of the money, some of the additional revenue that would be provided from locals will be paid back through grants. It'll be money that we float. But it's a heads up that if this is supported, I may be coming back to you, or the MPO may be coming back to you with some incremental increase in municipal local shares compared to what we've been contributing in past years, with the idea that those additional monies will be used to leverage discretionary funding for road projects, some in College Township, some not in College Township. But clearly the big projects that don't reside in College Township still have a profound impact on our municipality and the center region as a whole. So that's it for the bill. More on that probably after the next MPO meeting. We don't have another subcommittee meeting scheduled until after we present this to the full MPO.
Okay, questions for Eric on MPO?
You going to cover this morning's meeting?
No. You're a guest attendant.
I said you're going to cover it.
I know, you're the guest attendant.
I understand.
So I'll take your experience of it.
What's that?
I'll take your experience of it.
Okay.
Paul?
Just a real quick question on those funds. What's the timeline for? having
They're available in calendar year 2023.
Yeah.
We're budgeting for calendar year 2024.
Okay, so they're available.
Right.
I thought it was through 2025, and once you're awarded, there's so many years. that
Yeah,
you have
it's a
to
5-year
spend.
bill, so even if we're a year or two late, there'll still be 3 or potentially 4 more years of
Okay.
funding available. Now, that's not to say that staff has outlined a number of things that even with the resources they have right now, we can start to try to access in 2023.
Right. Things that were already in the works or in the plan.
Or
Might be
they're
able to
low
accelerate.
enough hanging fruit that it doesn't require as much effort or potential outside help that we can go after as far as discretionary. Formula is fine, staff can handle the uptick in formula funding. That just means we will be able to take more projects off the long-range transportation plan, put them on the tip, and actually get more projects that are already on the tip advanced through earlier phases of the tip. That just means the check we get is going to be larger. This whole discussion is about the competitive grants out there, the discretionary funding that's a big part of this legislation. And if, it's going to go somewhere.
Right.
If we
Might as
don't
well
do
go here.
anything, it'll go, well, you know, around here, everybody says, well, I'll go to Pittsburgh and Philly, but the truth is, it's going to go somewhere, and it's going to go to the places where the areas have the resources that they can apply and manage the grants, and
That's
we
where
want
it
to be
makes-
one of those people.
Well,
I
that's
think
where it
we do.
makes sense to make a strategic investment to maybe leverage that to a lot more.
We have mad skills in-house.
Yeah.
We just don't have
Bandwidth.
enough, and of course, Center Region Planning Agency is down 2 staff people already, so we're already starting in a hole. But, yeah.
Great, thank you.
Paul,
That's all I
any
had.
meetings?
The Public Safety Committee did not meet, but we were able to get a consensus to move forward a nominee for the zoning hearing board, Board of Appeals, excuse me, that went to, I believe, exec as well. And then yesterday, there was a College Township IDA meeting, relatively uneventful, got the auditor's report, discussed a few things. I am glad to say that the governance committee continues to work along the lines of organizing and developing a framework to streamline things. But it was a pretty productive meeting, relatively brief. I don't know, Adam, do you have any additional comments on that?
No, it went fine. There's still lots of work to do,
Yes.
but I do think that we're getting closer with each passing meeting to having a much more functional group. They're working through one of Eric's favorite words, a process at this point, and I think by following that process, they're getting themselves on track.
And several times self-corrected along the way, I noticed, which was nice. Did not need outside prodding to get back on the process. So anyway, those were the only two that I
Any
had.
questions for Paul? If not, I'll acknowledge that Mr. Best has joined us remote. Dustin, any COG regional meetings since our last meeting?
No, I had none.
Okay, very good, thank you. I spent quality time with Mr. Bernier this morning at the finance meeting. The highlights of that, began initial discussions of the municipal comments on the 2023 program plan and capital improvement plan. We also had an engaging discussion on the long-range view of facilities condition assessments. An action item was we reviewed the revised version of the Center Region Parks and Rec Mobile Concessions Vehicle Business Plan. After reviewing that, we the Finance Committee voted 3-2 to recommend to the general forum a purchase of a newly fitted out vehicle not to exceed $132,000. I'll talk about that when we get to the executive committee. Let's see, we executed an extension of our audit engagement letter at very good, favorable rates with the unknown commodity Meyer Dussel. They have great pens. So we also set our budget review sessions, and I'll push those out to everybody so they know there'll be three-hour sessions at the end of September to the beginning of October. That's it. Anything else you think I should highlight from?
No, if you're going to talk about the truck during your exec report,
Well, yeah, a little bit.
I would just offer that the length of the meeting, Rich and I were not the reason the meeting went 3 hours. I would just say that.
No?
There was a robust discussion about the CIP process,
Not the truck per
followed
se.
by an in-depth discussion on the truck.
On the truck, yeah.
It was good. It was healthy discussion.
Right, yep.
Thank you.
Pending any questions on finance, I'll move to exec, which was at lunchtime. We got an update on the classification and compensation study. That's moving forward. It's making its way. It's a very deliberate process. We probably aren't going to see any results, hard results, to decision-making results till late this year, very late this year. So there is a question out there. Are we going to provision in the 2023 budget for potential immediate adjustments, or are we going to wait for the whole report and then potentially do a budget agenda or amendment, because we'll already have approved the 2023 budget by the time we get substantial information. So that one's still coming. Dustin, you may see that in HR. We're going to see a resolution for a long-term employee of the COG. We did discuss the Housing Board of Appeals appointment, so you'll see that. There's a proclamation designating September as National Library Card Sign-Up Month. You'll be seeing that. We had I'm thankful to say, a fairly brief discussion on the COG building intermunicipal agreement modification. We wanted to set a timeline, when we're going to see that again. And we will be seeing that in September for a potential unit vote. I think I shared it that.
Really?
Yes, I shared at the time. They asked me, and I said, College Township was prepared to vote on this at the July meeting.
Yeah.
And
In case you forgot.
so, but I think we're going to get there, and we're going to at least take action one way or another. Next came up the concession truck. The discussion at exec was the only discussion was whether to put it on the agenda for a general forum discussion. So that was, that passed 4-1 to put it on. There'll be a presentation of the business plan. I will say staff did a very good job building that plan. In my time, I've not seen anything like that from COG. So there's a lot of good information in there. And then we'll hear all the concerns, we'll hear all the support, and then we'll take a vote. And we'll decide whether this is going to move forward. The intent was a budget amendment. The concession truck is similar to the fire truck and snow plows and all that kind of stuff. Lead times are bad. They want to get that going this year so that they're ready to hit the road next year. So we'll prepare to receive all of that. Those were the, various other little executive director reports and everything like that, but those are your big things. One general note, they've already bought the fire truck attenuator, and it will be there at the September meeting. It will be there to view at the September meeting. This meeting, you'll be seeing the first plug-in hybrids from Code will be, I think they're gonna have that on display for Monday's meeting. They just received the first of the two last week.
Where are they charging those?
I'm sure facilities has got something like, well, the same way John Fronick, they probably got a long extension cord that runs out in. Yeah. Good question.
In our parking lot.
In their parking lot. Pending any questions on exec? Great. I've lost my regular agenda.
I
Here we
would
go.
point out, though, that our comments, our discussion about the truck, concessions truck, assumed a used vehicle. I was just looking at your comments, because it didn't, having seen the business plan, me, a facilities rep, having seen that and having thought more about it, I'm in favor of a new vehicle now, and that's why the number is not to exceed
132.
130. That's a different number that's in the budget. Adam's having heart failure over there. The defibrillator around?
It's more than double.
I know. It was, we didn't really get in, the facilities committee didn't chime in on this. The discussion was mostly between staff and exec. But having seen the business plan, and personally, my preference is brick and mortar. And my second preference is contracted out. Brick and mortar is really not possible short-term, but it sounds like that is the intent long-term, that this is a stopgap. That changed my viewpoint on this as opposed to going down the, starting another. And as hard as it is to believe or accept, they can't, there's nobody out there to contract with, at least right now in this environment. So that takes me to my third choice, which is buy a vehicle, assuming the need. And then it really came down to used or new. So, from my standpoint, if we're going with choice number 3, I don't want some part-time help trying to troubleshoot a used concession vehicle that they don't know anything about. At least with a new one, it should be plug and play. It should be theoretically a turnkey operation. So those are my thoughts. I'm open to opinions. I know what Adams is.
Right. Well, but that's part of the reason that we wanted to get it to the general forum, have a presentation, everybody hears the same information, and then try to make an informed decision.
Right, I mean, I can suppose all kinds of things, but I haven't seen any of
Right.
the presentation or the business plan, and
Exactly.
I'm gonna hold my opinion until then.
It was different than little bit different, that's all I'm saying, than the discussion that we had, and we stayed kind of neutral on it
Okay,
in our comments. So
yeah,
we neither thumbs up or thumbs down. so.
okay.
Paul, you had a.
Yeah, I just had one thing that I neglected to mention. It wasn't the Spring Creek Watershed Commission, we did not meet, but the Phase 3 Working Group had their organizational meeting and are off the ground and are beginning their work to make some recommendations and do some outreach and
Nice.
to undertake that project. So I wanted to make sure that I mentioned that.
Excellent. Okay, any other regional county or liaison reports? Okay, PC, can anybody speak to?
PC met 2 nights ago. They reviewed 2 minor subdivision plans, 1 lot, 2 lots. You will be seeing those. They were moved on. You'll be seeing those at your next meeting.
Okay. Finally, diversity, equity, and inclusion reports. Again, we invite the public to share any information or happenings that they might have, any in council or staff have any to include this evening. Okay. Hearing nor seeing none, we're going to continue on. Consent agenda, the consent agenda for August 18th, bear with me. CA1, minutes from our August 4th, 2022 regular council meeting. A whole slew of correspondence. We have a letter from Clearwater Conservancy dated July 29th, 2022 regarding accreditation renewal, public comment period open. We have an email from Ocean State Job Lot dated August 2nd, 2022 regarding grand opening of August 27th, 2022. We have an email from Merlin Ritz dated August 1st, 2022 regarding casino. Email from Daniel Materna dated August 4th, 2022 regarding new comments posted regarding Nittany Mall Casino. Email from Susan Street dated August 5th, 2022 regarding proposed casino. Email from Daniel Materna dated August 8th, 2022 regarding College Township white paper on Nittany Mall Casino. Email from Daniel Materna dated August 8th, 2022 regarding Pennsylvania Gaming Commission Board right to know request. Email from Jackie Bonomo dated August 9th, 2022 regarding casino at Nittany Mall. Email from Deborah Trudeau dated August 9th, 2022 regarding casino. Email from Sue and Ron Smith dated August 9th, 2022 regarding casino opposition. Email from Nestor Hansey dated August 9th regarding casino. Email from Justin Collins dated August 9th regarding casino. Email from George Harrigan dated August 9th, 2022 regarding College Township Council clear and present responsibility to its constituency. Email from Beth Richards dated August 9th, 2022 regarding Stop the Casino. Email from Charlie Bainbridge dated August 9th regarding casino. Email from Cheryl George dated August 9th regarding casino. Email from Carol Camargo dated August 9th regarding oppose the casino. Email from Phyllis Gardner dated August 10th regarding casino. Email from Daniel Materna dated August 10th regarding College Township Nittany Mall mentioned by the media in Lafayette, Louisiana. Email from Joan Bouchard dated August 10th, 2022 regarding a casino doesn't belong within a few miles of the university. Email from Jack Igo dated August 7th, 2022 regarding resignation as Planning Commission alternate. Email from David Hatfield dated August 11th, 2022 regarding please consider reversing casino approval. Email from Susan Strauss dated August 12th, 2022 regarding overwhelming opposition to the Nittany Mall Casino. Email from Joshua Pape dated August 12th, 2022 regarding pending casino decision. Email from Dorothy Sandusky dated August 12th regarding Nittany Mall Casino. Email from Candace Kent dated August 14th regarding Nittany Mall Casino. Email from Robert J. Bauer dated August 14th regarding casino. And finally, email from Kathy Pollard dated August 15th regarding casino, a shameful consideration. Under CA3 action items, we have a resolution R-22-17, September is Suicide Prevention Month. And we have an appointment of LaRon Horner, SEO certificate number 03969 as alternate sewage enforcement officer through December 31st, 2022. Does any of council wish any of those items pulled for further discussion? If not, I'll accept the motion to approve the consent agenda. So I have a motion.
Second.
Take your pick of seconds. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Old business, one point that I will follow up.
You have the latitude to maneuver topics on the agenda.
I do?
You do.
Huh.
And I
Do you?
just wanted to remind you that you have individuals in the audience that in all likelihood are here for our last agenda item of the evening.
Right. Going back to the consent agenda, we did receive the resignation of Mr. Igo on the Planning Commission alternate. Can we pull the trigger and follow our process, current ABCs, et cetera, et cetera? Let's start down the process again. So let's get that implemented, and then anyone watching, we're looking for a Planning Commission alternate. Okay, as Adam suggested, we do have some folks spending quality time with us this evening regarding NB2, and we'll open that up, and I think Amy's leading us out on this one.
I am. You kind of caught me off guard. Let me get to my memo.
Talk to your manager.
Sorry, All right. So the memo that's in the agenda packet summarizes the events that have surround the request for a light in the parking lot for Daleview Park. I'll kind of summarize a little bit from the memo for CNET audience, but basically earlier in the year, residents who were around the parking lot noted that there had been an increase in activity after dark, and there was concern about this, and actually suggested the installation of a dusk to dawn light, which may stop the traffic at night. The Parks and Rec Committee, who oversees that particular park, actually had its drive around meeting on the 13th of June. So we added that park to our agenda and stopped there to meet with the residents and hear their input, which we did. And I have attached the minutes from that meeting to the agenda as well, so you can see the various topics, or the items that were discussed. We did not make a recommendation at that meeting. Residents were informed that the Parks and Rec Committee would discuss the topic at their August 8th meeting, which we did do. Leading up to that meeting, the committee asked for the police log to try to understand what the different calls were that were of concern, and I have attached that into the memo as well. And at the August 8th meeting, we met. They further discussed it, and had a few of the opinions that I've noted in my memo. I'll read them. One was that all parks close at dusk, and there should not be anyone in the parks. If there are violators, the police should be called. Number 2, adding a light will only attract more traffic. Number 3, the only other park that has lights is Slab Cabin, and when the lights are on, the message is sent, open for sledding, welcome, come. Adding a light to Daleview sends a confusing message, because we aren't asking people to come to that park, technically, since it is closed at dusk. Adding a light will set a precedent, and soon every park will be requesting a light. And then the 5th one was that most of the incidents in the police report were benign. For those reasons, the Park and Rec Committee voted unanimously to not recommend the installation of the light in the parking lot at Daleview Park. Staff agrees with this recommendation and asks that council vote against the installation of a dusk to dawn light.
Okay. Questions for staff?
I can tell you that when the light is on in Slab Cabin, they do come.
Oh, yeah,
Living
you're right
right
there.
across the street, yes, I know that.
Okay. Eric, please.
Yeah, I'm going, at this point, respectfully disagree with the Park and Rec recommendation and staff recommendation, or at least I have some questions. Yeah, I'll share my personal experience. Humor me here. I grew up across the street from Green Hollow Park 50 years ago, and we had a similar situation. You know, kids, I was one of them, you know, hanging out at the park, doing things they probably shouldn't do late at night at the park, and the township installed a light. And I can tell you, it did the trick. So I don't know that there was precedent that they were worried about, but they were simply addressing the situation in what they thought was the best manner. I understand and I respect precedent, and I embrace consistency. So from the standpoint that we don't have lights anywhere else except Slab Cabin that's open, I understand that, and on the surface I would agree with that. But if I took the second part of that said the justification that the park closes at night, you know, why would we need a light because the park's closed? You know, if I took that same logic and applied it to my house, for example, I have lights in my backyard and lights that come on at night to deter unwanted guests. But, so if I use that same analogy that we're using for the park, I would not illuminate my backyard or anything at night, because anybody who's snooping around there shouldn't be there, and I should just call the police. So I understand the precedent, and I understand the logic with not putting a light in a place that, but I don't necessarily understand why we couldn't make an exception as a deterrent. You know, and to me, I would be open to considering an exception, maybe even a modified exception. You know, it could be a motion-activated light, or it could be bollards or something. But in this particular case, I'm not quick to dismiss the potential for a deterrent simply because of the precedent and the consistency and the fact that the park closes at night. And I could go on and cite numerous examples of why you wouldn't put a deterrent in place, because those things shouldn't happen. So why would you need a deterrent? You know, the park closes at night, why would we need a light? But there's numerous examples, obviously, that we all personally use as deterrents that don't necessarily make sense, because I could just call the police if somebody's snooping around my house. What do I need the light for? So while I'm open to hearing some more logic or some more rationale, but I have to question the initial recommendation based on my own personal experience, for better or worse, with the light at Green Hollow Park back when I was a kid, and with the potential effectiveness it could serve as a deterrent, you know, even if it's modified to motion activated or something. And we haven't, you know, that's my initial thought. I'm open to reconsidering that position based on what others say.
Okay. Other thoughts? Paul, please.
Quick question. Reading through the police log of things, at least many of the people that they checked out claim that they didn't know that the park was closed after dusk. Is there any signage that clearly states that on the way in?
So the signage isn't lit.
But you
no,
can't
that's
read
true.
it because it's dark.
I mean, it is,
If I'm not, when you drive in, I believe the headlights do come to that, yeah, as you drive into the cul-de-sac and then want to go up there, you will pass that sign with your headlights.
Okay. Yeah, just reading that, it seemed like
Yeah.
maybe signage might be a deterrent, or, well, not a deterrent, but a warning that you might have something. And then the enforcement, I mean, is that something that we could ask the police to do a regular?
oh, they are,
And we
looks
have,
like.
yes, yeah.
Well, you know, I looked at the dates. I mean, this is spread out over, I mean, there was a big cluster between the end of August and the end of October in 2021. That was more than half in that 2-month period. So it doesn't seem like it's, I mean, this is over a fairly long period of time.
Yeah.
That's over 2 years, nearly. So, anyway, those were my thoughts and my questions.
Thanks. Carly, do you have any?
Yeah, I mean, piggybacking off of Paul, I don't know that it's common knowledge that if a park is closed at night, the parking lot is not something you can just park in and finish a conversation on your cell phone and then move on. I don't know that that's common sense necessarily, at least not to me. The parking lot is not necessarily the park. Delaview's weird because the parking lot is like in the park, but yeah, I mean, I have it in my head, but I mean, I live in a very similar situation. I'm directly adjacent to a parking lot to a park. I would not want a light put there. That's me personally. If the parking, I would think potentially a reflective sign that makes it clear parking lot is closed at night, police will be called. You know, like boom, done. That's clearly what's happening. I will argue that lights adjacent to homes that are on all night are not great for sleep, not great for wildlife, not great for insects. There's a lot of environmental, just extra lights at night. I'm not a big supporter of at all, especially in green space. Yeah, so I agree with Parks and Rec's recommendation, fully support it.
Okay. Dustin, our former Parks rep guy.
Yeah, everybody I do have a couple comments, stole my thunder too. I also live adjacent to a parking lot, actually it's kind of above me. And I'm very cognizant of the idea of the light pollution too, much of what Carlos said. So, just from that standpoint, to me, it does not sound great to have it dusk to dawn on all the time. I would, as a compromise, perhaps, being, supportive of a motion-activated light, perhaps. So it was only, just as a question of clarification, it was only recommended to be in the parking lot only, right? Not the remainder of the park, because that's where the incidents were happening?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, so, I just, a couple comments, and then we'll take your order, why not just, a motion light, if it's needed. The other thing is, look at these police reports, and much, kind of what Eric's saying, so now we're asking folks, if there is an issue, to police, the park, right? Because the police aren't gonna just come out to the park unless they get called, unless they have some kind of, where we have some kind of rotating patrol of the parks. I don't know if that's something that can be considered. Hey, should we have a rotation of patrolling of parking lots? The other thing is too, we're calling police anyhow. I lived in the Bucks County area for a long time, and I'll tell you, every park down there had a gate on it. That's how they controlled the parking lot. And those gates were shut at sundown. And the local police went around and shut all the gates, and that's what they did for the night. So just, just some general thoughts. That's all I have.
Great, thank you. I'll just share, I have an interesting paradox. My day job, I'm a big supporter of light. We don't have vandalism problems at our facilities. A lot of times we go in and we add lights and make problems go away. So I have an affinity to light. However, we also don't live we don't live right next to houses and everything for that. I am not concerned on precedent. The irony of Mr. Precedent and Consistency saying that he's not concerned about precedent and consistency is wonderful. And I agree. If it makes sense, you do it. And if we would do it there, we would do it in other places.
No, I said I respect precedent and consistency.
Well, you're the man. So I have various on that. At the end of the day, I look at the police report, and as Paul, I mean, it's a 2-year window and some of the things that are indicated there happen on my street. People having conversations, way too loud conversations at the wee hours of the morning and everything like that. So a little bit of concern about that and everything. So, and then without a strong lean either way, there's a reason we have a Parks and Rec committee, and I look to support their recommendation. So you've heard from council. I think some of our folks are here to speak to this. If anyone would like to share some comments before we share a final.
When you're ready for her. Sue Smith.
Oh, okay, good deal. We'll start with our folks here in attendance, and then we'll go to Sue.
Well, he's getting ready. I also live across the street from a parking lot in one of our parks. So we have a quorum on that.
Yeah, my name is Gene Shields. This is my house, the very first one you see there. My wife Laura here is in attendance as well. And on numerous occasions, more recently because I've now retired, we are home more than we were years past, especially in the evenings. There has been increased activity. Some of the stuff in the parking lot on the police report does say that the perpetrators were gone by the time the police showed up. Sometimes the police come within 5 minutes, sometimes it's 25 minutes. It just depends. They have other things to do than more important things to do. Most of the incidents, if you do notice, they do happen more in the fall, like this time of the year now, as high school starts back up, Penn State starts back up, you have football activities, people are doing things later on in the evenings. As far as the comments from Parks and Rec that they do not light parks, Slab Cabin has 2 street lights at their main parking lot, and they are both lit. They were lit last night. I drove by. If you leave tonight and you go home, drive by Slab Cabin, you will see 2 very tall street lights at that parking lot. If you go to Spring Creek Park, go to the parking lot on the entrance off Hauserville Road. I don't know if you have a map of that you can bring up. I do have a photo of it on my iPad. I don't think I could share it with you guys though, but the parking lot, there's the restroom at that Spring Creek, and then just out to the edge of the parking lot is the light that illuminates that, and then probably not very far distance are houses that are parallel, that are much closer. If you would put a light here, it would be to, if you would put a light here roughly in
There's a
the,
little pointer if you want to use it. Is it right there?
It should be
Pen,
attached.
looks like a pen.
okay. If you would put a light, even down at this end, that's about the distance of what they are from where the one is at Spring Creek. My thoughts were something maybe in this general area here, and you could even, instead of having it go straight down, if you tilted it, you would shine the light up this way towards the parking lot, away from these houses over here for some of the residents who are opposed, and some of the residents are in favor. Not all of them came today. I mean, personally, I don't really want to have a nice, tall, or very tall street light that illuminates and sends light clear out all over here like a great big large street light. I would be against that myself. But there are lower sodium lights that do not cast a large shadow. You could also put a, if it was straight down, you could put a cone over top of that so that the majority of the light goes straight down and does not illuminate over. Another place, Hauserville School, which was just recently enlarged, there was approximately 25 lights that go around there, and right next to that is Stogelman Field, which is a park, and there's a pavilion just up on the hill from that. So you do have parks. I'm just saying that you don't have parks that have lights on it, you do. They're out there. Whether or not Spring Creek Park is getting more traffic, I don't know. Whether or not Stogelman Field or up at that pavilion, whether they're getting kids up there doing things, there, if the light is attracting people as their opinion says, I don't know. In talking with some police officers who have showed up here, stating things, their recommendation, put a light in. So, Parks and Rec says no, some of you on council say no, some of you might say yes, we say yes. My opinion would be talk to the professionals, talk to the police officers or John Gardner, ask him what his thoughts are. And putting a light here, running electric, is probably going to be a pain in the butt because it's pretty much solid bedrock, not too far down underneath there. Or putting in a solar light, and even if it stayed on from dark till midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, generally we don't usually see much stuff after that. Anything else in this?
Just a comment about the...
If you can, ma'am. Thank you. I know, they make me use the mic too.
Just a comment about the police reports, and most of the incidents were benign. Most of the incidents were benign, yeah, but there was a couple where my husband approached people who had things, that we don't know what they were, and we didn't call the police when it first started, when he retired and we were home more. There was a kid dropping off a backpack back on the, near our property. We don't know what was in it, but it was pretty heavy, and the kid argued with Gene a little bit. This is something that we live beside this park. We see the activity here. July 29th, that report is not on there. I was coming back from the Spikes game with my grandson. There was a car in the parking lot. I called the police. They came by. A little bit later, another police car came. A little bit later, another car came. The police officer did call, give me a report that there were kids in the car hanging out. and he had to call their parents to come get them. Now, if you're just hanging out, your parents don't need to come get you. You get sent on your way. So there had to have been a reason that this police officer had these parents come get these kids, and that car stayed in the parking lot all night long, and they came and got it the next day. You know, like, if it's just, you know, huggy kissy, whatever, your parents aren't gonna come get you. But if there's more serious issues, you know, they're gonna call and have you come get, and maybe they'll just let them off on good behavior or whatever. You know, I've called the police, every time I call, they'll say, okay, we're gonna start coming by more often, and then it hangs off a little bit, and then we call, and then they keep coming by a couple more times, and they, you know, it's just, we have to call and bug them a lot. They don't come by regularly, and check the park. So we have a lot of widows who live on the other side of the cul-de-sac, live alone. Sometimes I'm home alone. Women are afraid. One of the neighbors takes her dog out late at night to go to the bathroom. You know, there's a car from the parking lot, lights shining down, coming down through the park. They speed, stones fly. You can hear people arguing up in the park. It's not something that we want in our park. Again, just one more thing is that up by Geisinger, they have this light. We've been driving around looking at lights, not my favorite thing to do. But they have these nice square lights that are low, and they're kind of yellow, and they're not real bright. They just shine on that area. We're not looking to light it up, you know, like Beaver Stadium. We just want the park lit up so that hopefully no one will come up and do anything or hang out at our park. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Sue Smith.
I think I'm on the Parks and Rec Committee, and I just thought I like the idea of the reflective sign. I think the sign, I mean, Paul said he hasn't seen it. It doesn't stand out particularly. So having it be a reflective sign that says park is closed and the police will be called would be effective. I think one of the things, I didn't hear all of what Amy said, but one of the considerations we had was how expensive lights are, and certainly we would want it, if we did get the light, it would be a motion light, which would be even more expensive. And I was wondering, we didn't also see the police report when we had our meeting, and I was wondering if maybe it was COVID related, that kids just needed a place to go that they could hang out outside because they couldn't be inside. I don't know when the report, police things work, but those are just some things that we haven't talked about at our meeting. Thanks.
Thanks, Sue. Anyone else wish to speak to council on this matter?
Just throw a little insight from past experience. I don't know if things have changed, but I know 6-7 years ago, the night shift police officers constantly in and out of the parks, shining their spotlights around. I would hope that they still continue out that tradition and spend a lot of time going through the parks, particularly the College Township assigned car. There's usually not much going on in College Township after dark, and that's one of the best ways to pass time and do something constructive. I just figured I would pass that on, and also I believe Chief Gardner, if you do believe there may be some problems, the police have their patrol complaint cards when they go out to a specific patrol zone. That could be listed as places to check, and they sign off on the card to show what they have been doing through their shift. I think it can be effectively patrolled, and I can say, at least in my past experience, 90% of the people you find in the parks, it's not bad situations. It was usually people are maybe a little bit amorous after dark, or you would have just kids hanging out. That was, it was very common for police to find people in 2 or 3 parks during the course of making rounds. And usually what it was is sitting in a car, or a boyfriend, girlfriend, sitting on a bench talking. So I just figured I'd throw in my insight, but I know the police would prior towards that a little more, but I think they already do. And if they're not, they should be.
To the manager, have we had any kind of conversation with Chief Gardner on this?
Yeah, we've had an ongoing dialogue, you know, when the Shields have contacted us, we've been in contact with Chief Gardner, and I believe they've been very responsive, but again, to the point that was made here by the Shields, that has a tendency to kind of wane after a period of time. But we have called on multiple different occasions about increased patrols, making sure that this park in particular, there was attention paid after dark. So, yeah, we have done that, we continue to do that. We do that in a variety of other locations as well, where we have complaints or concerns.
Would you classify this as the park having the most of those type of complaints?
Recently, I would say this is the one where we've had the most activity based on complaints or concerns that have been registered.
Okay.
I would say that my street, Shamrock, is very similar too, in that it's relatively remote cul-de-sac with a park right across the street and a parking lot, you know, and so very similar. I would be very interested in a reflective sign that kept people out, because there are people across the street once in a while. They don't stay very long, and if we do call, the police do come. It's only been a handful of times.
Okay.
And there's a pavilion too, by the way.
Oh, Dustin, please.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very responsive to the conversation going around, you know, can we talk to the police? Can we just have this as a contractual thing and say, hey, look, we want all our parks patrolled every night? Or we want you to hit, you know, 50% of the parks, you know, 3 days out of the week, the other days out of the week, hit the other 50%, you know? I mean, it's just something we can go to them and ask.
Yeah, from my standpoint, yes. You know, our contract basically gives us the latitude to make those requests in terms of the actual assignments. All of those kinds of decisions are police department based. But of course, we as a customer, if you will, in the contract service that we have with the State College Police Department, we have every right, every latitude to make that kind of a request. So while we have done this in response to upticks of various types, and this extends also, just so everybody knows, beyond after dark activities in parks, but it could be various traffic type situations, stop signs that are, you know, running of stop signs, other types of non-moving vehicle type violations. You know, there's a wide variety of things that I'm in frequent contact with the police department about in terms of areas of concentration, areas of concern, areas that need extra attention. So in this particular case, we could simply make a request for perhaps a wholesale change to scheduling to ensure, and as Mark has alluded to, the patrol cards would obviously give the chief of police a way to document and track how that activity is being addressed.
Yeah, I mean, anecdotally, I recall some years ago it being quite regular for a police car to stop by and run his spotlight along the park. I couldn't say if that's happening now. I haven't noticed it, but it doesn't mean it's not. I just recall probably 5 or 6 years ago it being like a more regular thing than I've noticed now. But I can imagine that being a good habit if it has slidden back a bit. And I'll say I do appreciate the conversation back and forth, and I appreciate the concern. It always helps to put, those police reports are so vague. They're almost like they're just these little tiny blurbs, and it's really hard to get a picture of what you're going through, of what's actually happening, because they're going to put the very minimum amount of information in there, of course. So while we were able to read through it, it didn't give us much to go on, let's say. But I'll say that whatever we do, I would be in favor of starting small, of starting with something like a reflective sign, and then and increasing police presence, and then reevaluating after some time and seeing if something like a light is necessary.
Is there consensus on us, at a minimum, the sign?
For me, yeah, I mean, I still support, everything I heard makes me support a sign even more, a light even more.
Right.
So obviously, I'm gonna support
Right.
lower tier deterrence.
So I'm gonna suggest a couple prong thing. One, Adam has a conversation with the chief, and I think it's a good policy, not just for here, but for all of our parks, if that prior procedure is not being handled. If there's consensus, signs, I'm a signs everywhere there's signs guy, so I'm limited on that, but I think it is definitely a viable solution. And then the third, if we could ask staff to start researching a potential solar motion type light, so that, if the problem doesn't abate itself, that we're ready to move to the next step. Does that sound workable?
Could we also ask staff just to confirm the fact that we do indeed have signs in parks, other township parks, as noted tonight? Because that kind of wipes out my whole concern over precedence or consistency.
You mean
Signs or
lights?
Lights, I'm sorry, lights.
Yes.
So
What I heard
there's
tonight-
definitely a light at the Hauserville Spring Creek Park. I know that light. Not that I've seen it after dark, because I haven't.
I have not either.
But it's there.
Yes.
And though I'll say some of those lights, I would believe, maybe not that light specifically, that light's probably been there since the park was developed, to be honest, but I do think a couple of the lights you mentioned would be partially because they are part of a bike path. I can't remember the first one you mentioned. Slab Cabin. Right, at that parking lot, that's part of a bikeway, and I've actually appreciated that light when I'm coming through over the bridge, that I can see where I'm going on my bike. I would think that that's one of the reasons that one's on all the time, but.
There's actually some down further in the parking lot.
Oh, are there further
Yes.
down in?
Yeah,
Okay.
there's the one that you've identified, absolutely, that one's there, but there's an additional one that I think that the Shields had referenced.
But yeah, there are definitely lights
Yeah.
in these places, yeah.
Now, the only thing I'll throw, there is some talk in the region about a dark skies initiative and everything, so I'll throw that out, but I still think we have to do what we need to do and everything, but.
Well, and it's if that initiative should take hold, it would be really important to gather the police data beforehand, so that should there be a change,
Right.
that can be,
Sure.
a light could go back in if it were taken out, right?
Please.
Just a question, I've identified, or have recorded the two multiple prong items that you mentioned, which is to speak with the police, memorialize the park patrol for all parks after dark, or on night shift, the solar motion light, the research part of that. With respect to, is there also agreement relative to the reflective sign?
Yes.
Okay.
That was one of the.
I don't know that we got the.
Yeah, there's one of those signs that exists at the Stony Batter parking lot, that I do believe is reflective. So we have one like that up there.
Okay.
I will tell you, it doesn't deter people.
Right.
It may deter some, but there's still people parking in there at night.
My only concern with respect to a changing of the signage at the parks was not all that long ago that we went through an issue about signage at parks. And I want to be sure that if we move to put a reflective sign that addresses the issue, dusk to dawn, open, police will be called, whatever goes on that sign, but there isn't going to be any additional issues with the Parks and Rec Committee relative to that.
We can't
Well-
answer that, can we?
No.
I'm not thinking of like
I'm just making the statement that.
Right,
sign.
right. Those were
I-
identification signs.
Yeah.
Right.
This is regulation sign.
And I think we need to stick to parking lot closed after, like parking lot closed after dark.
I would agree.
Yeah, something like just very
Yeah.
straightforward. Because closed dusk to,
Well, the only reason I say the dusk to dawn, because
that's what they say now.
that's what they say now.
Right.
Well, can we just remand that back to Parks and Rec and have a standard? Just, because it'd be nice to have the same sign at every park, instead of having, 5 or 6 different.
Spoken like a former Parks and Rec guy.
Excellent.
Okay, sounds good.
So our third, as opposed to placing, is to remand back to the Parks and Rec for potential development of a reflective park closed sign.
Very good.
Okay, you folks heard what we're looking at doing. Please keep us advised and we'll be monitoring as well. But thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Manager, am I going back to OB1 or
I-
NB1?
At your discretion, but I would think that would be entirely appropriate.
Okay, very good. OB1, Proposed Ordinance Revisions, Pedestrian Facilities Master Plan. Mr. Bloom.
All right, I'm pinch hitting tonight for Lindsay, so bear with me. I'm going to walk through this a little bit methodically. First off, my shameless plug, as we're working towards our adoption and implementation of Walkable College Township, our pedestrian facilities master plan. I do want to note that our public input period, is open. Opened here earlier this week and will run through October 13th. So this is part and parcel to that discussion. With that shameless plug out of the way, one of the critical pieces to the implementation of the pedestrian facilities master plan is obviously ordinance revisions to actually implement some of the recommendations that were set forth in that plan. In that vein, Lindsay and staff have been working with the Planning Commission to identify sections of our existing code that may need to be revised accordingly to make that implementation happen. There are 3 chapters in our existing code that have sections pertaining to pedestrian facilities, those being Chapter 177, Streets and Sidewalks, Chapter 180, Subdivision and Land Development, SADO Ordinance, and finally, Chapter 200, Zoning. I'm going to kind of take those in order of magnitude in terms of changes. So in July, staff presented their recommendations to Planning Commission for review and comment, and just kind of briefly walk through summary. Chapter 177, Streets and Sidewalks. This is really geared towards ensuring the maintenance and upkeep of the township's road infrastructure, and it ties in sidewalks as well. This is more geared towards system preservation, limiting damage from other entities working in the township right away. As you'll recall, this section of the ordinance was updated in 20 and 21, and the design standards and maintenance requirements were ultimately moved. Based on their review and based on that recent change, Planning Commission and staff identified no changes required to Chapter 177. Chapter 200 Zoning. In this chapter, again, similarly, Planning Commission and staff came back with no immediate changes required. However, they do pose a question. While no specific revisions are recommended for Chapter 200 at this time, they do beg the question, should a change of use have specific requirements to require pedestrian facilities in some situations? As an example, if you had a bank here locally that changed to office, that's obviously a change in use, and at that point, does that trigger the opportunity to essentially claw back and ask for pedestrian facilities that weren't required as part of the original land development? More of a philosophical question of council, but something that they identified in their review. And finally, the one that has probably the greatest amount of change, and there's nothing that you haven't already seen in this, is Chapter 180, Subdivision and Land Development. Upon their review, Planning Commission acknowledged that at this time, the only code that required revisions to implement Walkable College Township was Chapter 180, specifically Section 180, 16-1, And as, I'm not going to go through each one, I'm just going to kind of highlight the fact that what they've done here is incorporate at the very onset of that section, the goal statement that was identified in the draft pedestrian facilities master plan. In section E, F, and thereon, they identify those kind of key elements that council has talked about as the development of that occurred. And that includes the fee in lieu for pedestrian facilities, the deferral process, as well as the waiver process. And again, it gets into the detail as specified in the plan, specific to each of those sections. So with those in mind, the Planning Commission's recommendation after their review was that College Township Planning Commission recommends the council move forward with the adoption of the pedestrian facilities master plan and enact the ordinance changes as presented by staff. So next steps in terms of where we're headed with this. As this 60-day public comment period is now open, staff's plan moving forward is on August 18th. This is coming to you. September 1, the draft ordinance, if there's any revisions made, would then go on to Center Region Planning Commission for their review. As this continues to evolve, the week of September 5th, the notification letters would be sent to adjoining municipalities. Sometime mid-September, we're looking possibly 13th or 14th, we would look to do an open house on the pedestrian facilities master plan, including these ordinance revisions. And then ultimately aiming at October 20th as the public hearing on the draft and the ordinance revisions at your council meeting. So again, as I kind of walk through this quickly, actions requested tonight was for you to review and provide feedback on the ordinance revisions as noted, and that kind of philosophical question on chapter 200. And that council should look to set the public hearing officially for Thursday, October 20th, to address two parts: the draft walkable College Township pedestrian facilities master plan and ordinance 022-04, and that's on the proposed revisions to chapter 180 subdivision and land development to implement the recommendations of the plan. So with that, I will stop. I know Mark has been involved with the discussions through Planning Commission as well, so we'll take your questions, and between he and I, we'll try to tag team this out. So.
Excellent. Questions for staff? Comments? Please.
Yeah, thanks. So the first thing I noticed, because of course when this came up, I thought, let me see something about cul-de-sacs. I've been pushing the cul-de-sac hope for conversation in front of Planning Commission for a number of years now with this. Was it discussed at all?
I have to look to you.
I don't believe that was really addressed.
Right.
I imagine we could take this back to Planning Commission.
Well, I mean, I'd hate to pause things. I'm just gonna have a moment of my disappointment about this. I know that I'm the only one who's brought it up. I don't recall hearing anything in the opposition from other council members, so I would have hoped that it would have been a discussion item. In reading about things further, I'll say that actually cul-de-sacs are an important, and really actually a very important discussion item when it comes to pedestrian facilities, because the pedestrian people are anti-cul-de-sac because it often creates an end of a pedestrian connection. And so the common suggestion is these days to require that there be a pedestrian connection at the end of a cul-de-sac if there's somewhere for it to connect to. And I know we've had these come through for some of our cul-de-sacs in the township, and they've been really important pedestrian connections, and we've also had them not come through, and they've been very frustrating. So I do think, besides my suggestion of a possible waiver for sidewalks on a cul-de-sac, at the very least, a discussion about pedestrians connections at the end of a cul-de-sac, should there be somewhere for it to connect. I would like both of those discussed before Planning Commission at some point. I'm not gonna hold things up necessarily, But I do think that that should have its day in the sun. Yeah, thanks.
Just a clarifying point. Understood about existing or to be built cul-de-sac connecting through where possible, if there's something to connect it to, making sure that there is that connection. The other thing is, I just want to be sure I'm clear. You're talking about the waiver for the removal of?
Right, so
The sidewalk on a
sidewalks,
cul-de-sac.
right, sidewalks are impervious, they do require stormwater drainage, they make development much more expensive. The need for a sidewalk on a short cul-de-sac is, in my understanding, quite minimum. And it seems like a bit overstep of our request for sidewalks in the community to require it on the side of every single street, on every single side, especially for some of these very small traffic areas.
Sure.
Yeah. Does that make sense?
No, absolutely, it does.
And I just want to hear planning commission's
Right,
thoughts on it, right?
Council may recall, some members of council may in fact recall that we spent a number of meetings and quite a bit of angst in dealing with a cul-de-sac and the decision about whether or not to require sidewalks in a cul-de-sac. And ultimately, and I don't remember precisely how we resolved it.
Was this on a specific land development?
This was actually off of Brandywine Drive. There was a cul-de-sac, I'm not remembering that at the moment offhand, but we had a number of issues there. That was the situation. That was really, that particular project was a years-old land development plan that had indicated that upon the complete development of homes on that street, that a sidewalk would be completed. And many years after the fact, that note on the plan was discovered and resulted in the township going back to the homeowners and through the homeowners association and requiring that sidewalk to be placed. And that was kind of the initial start of a lot of our sidewalk conversations. So this goes back.
Has had its day, but
This goes back a while,
Well-
but we did have issues with respect to cul-de-sacs in that particular area. And at the moment, I'm just not recalling how we ended up deciding it, but it was quite the subject of discussion. So it's a good point. And the other thing I wanted to add very quickly, I don't think we're here early enough that because we are anticipating an October adoption for both elements of the walkable College Township plan, I think we have plenty of time to go back to the Planning Commission and have those kinds of discussions, which is one of the reasons why we wanted to be here a little bit earlier, get feedback from council, and be able to go back to Planning Commission if necessary.
Yeah, it's a good point that Adam's making. Honestly, we're treating a little bit of tonight's discussion just like public comment. There may be revisions that come out of this discussion this evening that change what the plan looks like, change what the ordinance revisions look like before adoption. So we do have some buffer built into the schedule that can allow us to go back. What we have to be mindful of is that review time period for Center Region and the contiguous municipalities. But, I'm always a proponent of if we have to nudge the end point out just a little bit to get it right the first time, I'm okay doing that too. So these types of comments, again, I don't see a deal breaker. And I think there's time built into the existing schedule to achieve that. But again, if we have to nudge the end point out, we'll do that too to make sure it's comfortable for everybody before it's adopted.
great.
Well, hold on, let's get consensus. Do we have consensus that we would like to ask the
That
planning
we'd
commission?
like to what?
Do we have consensus that we would like to ask the planning commission to look at cul-de-sacs?
I'm not in favor of giving cul-de-sacs a free pass, and I would just offer that cul-de-sacs vary in length.
Yes.
Oftentimes, you'll find a park, or you'll find some access needed off that street. I live on one that's an example, cul-de-sac that feeds Nittany Terrace. You live on one that feeds a park.
Slab Cabin Park, there's one.
Under the definition of cul-de-sac, if you just gave it the blank exception, you would lose the access to the park.
Right, but that falls under what you were saying about as a destination out of the cul-de-sac.
Connecting to something.
Well,
Connecting to something.
it does,
didn't-
and specifically, I'm really talking about standalone, small cul-de-sacs. I'm not talking about neighborhood cul-de-sacs. I'm really talking about, I mean, that would be up for discussion, obviously. I'm not even necessarily for it. It's genuinely something I'd like to look at when we're looking at the cost of development and impervious surfaces and stormwater runoff. Like there are, I hope that everybody understands, I am 100% in favor of pedestrian facilities, being a major user of them myself. But I'm not 100% in favor of them just for the sake of them being there. That's all.
Right, right. So, to your point, what I heard
Yep.
was the destination out of the cul-de-sac absolutely would trigger it, that it should be there. The sidewalk should be there.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Right.
Under those limited constraints, very short sidewalk, very short cul-de-sac doesn't feed anything, yeah, it's hard to argue with that logic. I just didn't hear that the first time.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, and the length of it, I actually have, length is one of the, there's different, you know, you could have a whole neighborhood and have a cul-de-sac at the end, and that's a valuable asset to
one.
that neighborhood.
Walnut Springs.
Yeah, yeah, so.
Yeah, and it connects.
Well,
to
I mean,
something else.
I mentioned length in my
Yeah,
initial
yeah, yeah.
statement,
I
so.
missed it, sorry, I missed it.
Oh, that's
Yep,
okay, yeah.
yep. But, so going again, under those, do we have consensus to ask our planning commission to take a look at that? It'd be one thing if you said, yep, they talked about it and they didn't feel.
we're voting on it right now.
But I'm not hearing that they even talked about it.
Yeah, and one of the things that I would even throw in there, Carla, this might be kind of a compromise approach to it, is that kind of language could even be built into the waiver process. If, you know, when you're looking at them on a case-by-case
Exactly.
basis, that may be a trigger for a waiver. If it's, you know, the cul-de-sac to nowhere. So, you know, if that's that kind of a
It's the
situation.
low-traffic cul-de-sac.
Yes.
We got Mr. Toretti to stop using sidewalks to nowhere. We're not gonna readopt it, so.
But, you know, that's a potential way to get there without necessarily getting into the weeds over defining cul-de-sacs. That allows you more of a case-by-case review.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of cement in a cul-de-sac sidewalk. I'm just
Absolutely.
throwing it out there. It is a lot of cement.
yeah.
Right.
So, yeah.
Okay, other comments regarding the proposed and everything? Paul?
Real quick question, on the section about deferrals, the 1 through 4 seem to me, this is under F, 1 through 4, do those all have to apply? And are those really considered to be conditions of approval for the deferral?
Let me reacclimate myself here just.
Yeah, sidewalks are required,
Justification.
justification, the hardship, no alternatives, cost prohibitive formula, those would all seem to me to be
I believe those are written as
requirements
requirements,
of,
hard and fast, yeah.
okay, and then just maybe making it clear that, is that all or some of those first 4
Okay.
have to apply?
Yep.
And then I would say that from 5 on are more guidelines or conditions of once the deferral is granted. I don't know how you break those up, but it seemed to me that those were kind of 2 separate things. And I don't know what the answer is to that, but if we could maybe rework that, I think it would be more clear.
Sure.
I had to read it through a couple times.
Yeah, no, these are great comments, and much like the discussion with cul-de-sac, I think this, you know, this is the kind of stuff that
Sure.
we have the time to build in to
Great.
have that discussion.
I don't have any problem with any of them, it's
Sure.
just, you know, how they're blocked and how they
Understood.
apply.
Okay. Eric, anything?
Yeah, two things. One is very similar, one's very similar to Paul, but you had asked for input on the philosophical question. I don't know how others
Oh,
feel.
right.
But that's an interesting question, because think back, we always say when we're doing a land development plan or when we're doing a rezoning request, well, it's more applicable on a land development.
Yeah.
The use may change. You say that your particular use won't generate a sidewalk, but what happens when you go out of business and somebody else moves in who does? So part of me says that I don't want that because I want to stick to my guns on the land development plan and say, be able to say, you know, the use can change after you, so you need to put this in. Part of me says, well, we may have been too lenient at some point and granted a waiver or let someone off the hook, and that then would give us the opportunity, when the use does change to something that's more intense, pedestrian-driven, to go back and ask for that, whereas we missed that opportunity. So I'm torn between the two, but I think we ought to have that discussion because it could be a very powerful tool if we decide to use it. If we all decide, hey, let's just stick to our guns and hold fast in the land development plan and require those things, anticipating that the use could change. Because if we do that, we also give a developer some ammunition to say, hey, if the use changes, you've got that language to come back and get a sidewalk after that. So I don't know what's the right, it does kind of open up a bit of, it could be a blessing and a curse.
Yeah, it could, and, you know, I'll look at it when you're building interior improvements and everything like that. You change the use, you gotta meet the new use, you know, kind of thing, so, yeah.
I could support it either way. I'm just pointing
Yeah.
out, I think, what would be the pros and the cons
Sure.
of that. On the Paul's comments, I would be interested in staff thoughts on a little bit of potential restructuring starting on page 2. Reading through this, you know, I go down, I see A, general sidewalks, and then I see B, exceptions, C, waivers, D, alternatives, E, fee and lieu. Then I go further down and I see deferral and I see waiver, and then I read under waiver, the waiver shall only be considered if fee and lieu and deferral options are exhausted, which makes me wonder if waiver, the whole waiver thing ought to be at the bottom, that there ought to be some structure that says, you know, waiver is now like a sub-option, because these, the A is general, so it's almost like B, C, D, and E shouldn't be B, C, D, and E. They should be a subcategory under general, because general is saying this is what's required, and then B, C, D, and E are saying here's your exceptions. Well, shouldn't they be coming under A? Anyways, those kinds of things that we were so engrossed with getting the language right that maybe there are some formatting tweaks that would make it read and understand it a little bit better, along the same lines as what Paul had suggested, particularly when it comes to waivers, because why have waivers up here when you really can't use waivers until you get through?
You've exhausted the other streets.
Well, and somehow waivers is both C and G.
Right,
Yeah.
right, so it oughtn't be in C at all if it's something that doesn't apply till after you get by D and E. Just those kinds of things.
Sure.
Nothing to drag the meeting down tonight, but.
No, and I understand exactly what you're saying, Eric, because, you know, the way the plan kind of reads is, it's a progression
Yes.
of, you know, build a sidewalk. If you don't build a sidewalk, for whatever reason, you look at fee and lieu. If
Right.
fee and lieu doesn't work, then you look at deferral. If deferral doesn't work, then waiver's kind of your last.
And that's how I think it should flow. Right now, it looks like all individual
Yeah, it's
à la carte
disjointed.
options that you pick independently. Or
Yep. And I'm right on that with you.
Okay.
I got you.
That's it.
Anything, good? Dustin, anything else? Okay.
Good.
Great. The only thing I would ask is, you know, we're starting to put numbers into this. In some examples, we've used resolutions, they're referred to resolutions so that we can update those
Sure.
as they update. If we put them in the ordinance, it's a little different process. It's not as easy a process. So if we could put the numbers
Sure.
in a resolution form or something, as long as that still makes it enforceable.
Numbers, yeah, the ordinance should state that the number, dollar figure, whatever, set by resolution and refer to that section. So,
Right.
yeah, we do that with many of those things.
Right.
Yep, we can do that.
Cool. Yes,
Can we
please.
go around the table quick about the philosophical?
Sure.
Question.
You start, or Eric
I
started?
mean, Eric started.
Eric
Yeah.
started.
I just was
Go
curious to
ahead.
hear other people. I mean, my initial gut reaction, without thinking about it very long or looking into it, is actually more of a no, for the same reason that Eric mentioned. Then it could become a reason. Although that's up to us. We can just be like, nope, that's the rule. You just got to catch up. But honestly, generally, it's more because I feel as though a change of use is often welcome and often what we are seeking if an old use is no longer working. And I would be concerned that requiring where financial upfront, maybe for a change of use, isn't that big. You're just renting the space and renovating it for your needs. I mean, we could be talking very small, I guess I would worry that it's not business friendly, and it would I don't know, inhibit progress and redevelopment, but not redevelopment, just change, just filling empty spaces. Yeah.
Adam's got some thoughts on that.
I think you're onto something, Carla, here, that I think that I would absolutely support. I don't think a change of use is enough. I think a change in ownership changes the equation significantly. A change in use, and Mark can tell you, we can go through multiple changes of uses within relatively short periods of time for particular properties, correct?
Well, and even more confusing, what happens when you change from Choice Cigarette to Smoker Square? That is technically, that is a change of use. It's a new business and a new use coming in, but they're an identical thing.
Or on the other hand, you go from something that is pedestrian heavy and to something that's not pedestrian heavy. In that change of use, are we judging what is pedestrian heavy and what's not? I guess I don't know.
In that case, you'd already have the sidewalk in.
Well, not if it's existing.
Yeah, depending on whether you started the less intensive use, move to the higher or higher.
Well, no,
move to lower.
the example she said was you start with the intensive use. Well, with the land development plan, they're putting the sidewalk in.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's already there.
Not if it's already there. I mean, not if it's existing, which is what we're trying to catch up on, right? I mean, that's what we're trying to catch with this, I guess, is what do you know what I'm saying? No.
That's all right.
Yeah, I guess.
It's just something I didn't know we would solve it tonight. I just
Right,
wanted to start, and I don't even know where I come down. Because
For
there's
sure.
benefits, there's advantages and
Well,
disadvantages
is that
to
something
both.
that we need to keep this moving forward?
No, and that's why, with Chapter 200 and why Planning Commission kind of brought it forward the way they did, and I don't want to put words in their mouth, so Mark, if I'm completely off base, you can tell me. They recognize that it merits a discussion.
Yeah.
It warrants a discussion, but they also recognize where Carla was earlier, she don't want to hold up implementation of this plan. This is
Yes.
something that we can address at a date beyond
Okay.
adoption.
So
of plans.
future agenda item for this, for that element of it, so that we can keep on, that's my biggest fear. We've been waiting for this
Yeah,
for
oh, yeah.
so long.
And by default, there is no use, right now, change of use doesn't trip it. So that works. In Carla's example, that's good.
Yeah, we're not
Right.
changing.
Well, yeah, no, I thought we were just, I thought
So-
they were just looking for like, off the
Yeah,
off the
if we had a
cuff
clear consensus.
response.
Right, if we
Yeah.
had a clear consensus right here, right now, why wouldn't we just
I mean,
incorporate
Eric,
that?
I have no idea. I'm just
I
giving
don't-
my, yeah.
As you heard me say, it could go either way. I could go
Sure,
either way.
sure, there's arguments either way, absolutely.
Yeah, and my initial take was yes, not, kind of opposite, and the reason being that we could always waive it if we needed to, but if we eliminate it from our purview, blanket, then we lose that element of control. It could be an incentive for somebody to say, hey, look, we're gonna waive this so that you do a redevelopment sometimes.
Right.
That's one of the concessions that you can make, and we always would have that ability, or council would always have that ability to do it. So,
And that's how I looked at it. You never want to take a tool out of the tool bag.
that was sort of my initial thought of it. I can see where Carl is coming from as well. If it became a barrier, I think council could act and just waive it, or, you know. But again, to the point of what triggers a change in use. If it literally is putting up a different sign,
Different ownership could be the same.
yeah, where do you draw that line? But it's
Yeah, I was
worthy of
gonna say, the
discussion.
criteria for that, I think, is something for that discussion.
Right, yeah, precisely.
So recognizing that change of use is well established in College Township. So if we go down that route, that's kind of a whole,
Yep,
another kettle of fish type of a thing.
Right.
But, yeah,
We would need to
yeah, that would
Define
be,
it,
that would
yeah.
be a, you know, and again, Mark works primarily with, as a zoning officer, with change of use. I mean, signage is kind of an element that really only enters in if in fact he's dealing with the change of use. So change of use is really the benchmark, the standard that is utilized by our zoning department in terms of bringing to bear the balance of our ordinances in a particular project or a particular location.
I guess I would also opine that a significant change of use highly likely will be accompanied by a land development with a significant change to the building. So it brings us right back where we want to be anyways.
That's true. But it's noted as a topic of discussion
Okay.
for a future meeting.
Great,
Okay.
thank you.
anything,
Yeah, there's one thing that I noticed that we missed, and I think it's a reference that needs to be made, but there's no mention here with respect to a referral to the workforce housing ordinance, which does in fact provide relief for various sidewalk requirements. And I just think that we need to be sure that we capture that reference in the appropriate location. So, for example, very quick, the thing that comes to mind, in the workforce housing ordinance, we require, if somebody's utilizing that ordinance, they're only required to do sidewalks on one side of the street. And again, I don't know that they would normally be subject to this at all, but the point is, we should make that reference and make it clear that those things need to be referred to this other section of our ordinance.
Sure. Very good.
So that's it.
Okay. What I heard is I don't think we're ready to set the public hearing. Is that correct?
I think you're safe in not setting the public
we've got
hearing
time.
until you have some feedback
Yeah.
from the planning commission.
Right.
And again, the question I guess that I would have with what you would like the planning commission to review, does it in fact include the philosophy? They've already had the philosophical discussion, and they were not able to reach consensus on that. So my recommendation to you is that they've left that for council to
Yes.
resolve, so that that part of it not be remanded as part of,
Correct.
back to, so no philosophical to planning commission, but these other items that we've identified would be going back
Right.
to planning commission.
Yeah, at this point, I would concur with Adam. That chapter 200 discussion is a discussion for another day, not necessarily tied to this. What is here are great comments, what you provided tonight, and I consider this fine tuning to get us to where we need to be. And yeah, what I would plan to do is have a discussion with Lindsay at our next opportunity and have her work on a task that goes before Planning Commission, basically a revision of what you see tonight, incorporating what we talked about, and cycle back around to you at another
Perfect.
meeting.
Perfect. Okay, so
It's a quick turnaround too, I think, so.
Yeah, exactly.
So
Especially if they're not dealing with the philosophical issue.
Right, and
No.
again, you may see.
we have to provide direction.
Depending on those review timelines that are associated with Regional Planning Commission as well as the adjoining municipalities, you may see that endpoint bump out a little bit, but we're talking small increments, not big changes.
But we can see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Correct.
Yeah, okay. So, unless there's anything else, we will close out OB1.
And move to remand. Motion to remand to the planning commission?
I move to remand to planning commission.
Is it a remand, or is it, I mean, they've already had it. But if you want to remand, sure.
Well, whatever you think is more appropriate.
Well, I made the motion, sorry.
She made the motion.
She did.
Do I have a second? We have a second. Any further
I'm a good
discussion?
listener.
Call the question. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye. And that
All
means
those
we get
opposed?
to read the remand letter.
You do.
All those opposed, please say no. Motion carries. We are now closed out OB1. MB1, grant for removal of invasive species, Mount Nittany. Mr. Bloom again.
All right, and again, I'll beg your patience here because this is the culmination of 3 concurrent discussions that are happening here in the township. So it's all kind of jammed into one memo, but they are all somewhat intertwined, interrelated. So we felt this was a best way to bring them forward and open this discussion here amongst council. So again, first item of those 3 topics, in June, you'll recall that Dustin provided to each of you a letter requesting approval of staff resources to assess the feasibility and execute a cooperation agreement for conservation and preservation efforts on Mount Nittany, including specifically the Stony Batter Natural Area. At the time, and I don't mean to put words in Dustin's mouth, so please, Dustin, if I'm wrong, jump in here. It was envisioned that this interagency agreement was one akin to the one that we're working on with Thompson Woods Preserve. As proposed, the agreement would be between College Township through its Park and Recs Committee, as well as with Mount Nittany Conservancy. Separate to that discussion, there have been discussions amongst Parks and Rec Committee specific to acquiring grants for conservation efforts and removal of invasive species, both plant and insect variety. The Parks and Rec Committee further referenced the potential for creation of a separate nonprofit to aid in acquisition and stewardship of said grants. With the proposal, Parks and Rec, and that with Dustin's proposal and Parks and Rec Committee's discussions in mind, staff has worked on some investigation just to get some background data to kind of move this discussion forward. Specifically, we're starting small, and that'll be kind of the theme of what you hear from me tonight. Looking specific at the addressing invasive species on Mount Nittany. Before making the leap into creation of a interagency agreement or a new nonprofit entity as was proposed, one of the things that we wanted to do was evaluate what the existing capacity was for this type of an effort. In that vein, we've had discussions with Clearwater Conservancy, discussions with Penn State Extension, as well as kind of bloomed into a discussion with Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture. So I'll take those individually and just kind of frame those up. Clearwater Conservancy, I spoke directly with Deb Nardone in regards to her organization's capacity to assist with acquisition and stewardship of grants. That was that piece of the discussion that Parks and Rec had with the express goal of conservation efforts, including mitigation of invasive species on Mount Nittany. Mr. Nardone noted that they do have capacity specific to grant administration. She did circle back to me and say, in terms of boots on the ground doing this thing, they're stretched pretty thin, but in terms of grant administration, they would be able to assist. They also have a willingness to do so. But one of the things that she did caution is that they would be sensitive to the role of Mount Nittany Conservancy in here. It's, obviously they're being sensitive to each other's turf, essentially. So they would only take on this effort if there was some concurrence and agreement with Mount Nittany Conservancy. But she also expressed a willingness to aid in coordination of volunteers to undertake tasks as needed in terms of conservation and removal or treatment of invasives. Reached out to Penn State Extension. And what they were able to provide, and one of the things that was included with your memo here tonight, was more educational resources, which is very much their mission. They are dedicated towards delivering science-based information to people, businesses, and communities. In particular, they have an abundance of educational resources and courses to deal with best practices to address invasive species. Of particular interest, and one that I know we've had some discussion here before, was specific to the impacts of both the spongy moth and the spotted lanternfly, specific to Mount Nittany. And as I provided in the agenda memo, they do have the current 2021, spotted lanternfly management guide. That is a great resource and something that is important to keep in mind. So you've already had some discussions about a potential spraying program for the spongy moth in 2023 if that infestation were to continue. So that kind of naturally dovetailed into the discussion about the spotted lanternfly. And again, they provided some of that management guide, some of those resources to kind of give us some information about, are they apples to apples approach to treatment, which I can tell you they are not. It's a little different approach to tackling the spotted lanternfly. But that research led into a discussion specific with Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture and kind of uncovered other elements. So in 2021, College Township entered an agreement with the Department of Agriculture providing the consent for treatment to address spotted lanternfly specific to our property, the Stony Batter natural area. That agreement was attached as well. In the discussions that I had with the forester, he noted that there is an active spotted lanternfly survey program in Center County. This consists of a 2-employee crew. They are actually covering 5 counties at this point. They are surveying, reporting any findings of the fly. And again, according to Forester Ethan Park, they've been keeping a close eye specific to Center County and did note that they have been surveying Stony Batter. As of early August, there were no further findings of the fly on that property. I know there had previously been some indication that there may have been some there. Mr. Park noted that early in the infestation, some county conservation districts had been doing their own control efforts, but outside of what the USDA and Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture were offering. At this time, he's unaware of any of those programs continuing. So, long way of saying, currently in Center County, there's no active treatment program outside of what they're doing. So again, that's a quick encapsulation of discussions with those and some of the recommendations and finding and kind of opening this up for you to have a more in-depth discussion on the proposal that Dustin put forward and these other concurrent discussions. Some of the things that staff is offering is that further discussions between Mount Nittany Conservancy and College Township should be held to discuss those shared conservation and preservation goals. Obviously, we have property there, and then Mount Nittany Conservancy is responsible for the larger portion of Mount Nittany. As I noted, start small. There had been some discussion about new entities, new programs. We would advise that the more evaluation needs to occur in terms of existing capacities. Essentially, just we uncovered with Clearwater that there's an opportunity there to basically achieve the goal that of some of the discussions that have been happening. At this time, it appears between Mount Nittany Conservancy, Clearwater, and College Township, there may be adequate capacity to achieve a great deal of conservation efforts, both on our property as well as on Mount Nittany as a whole. The Parks and Rec Committee, as they continue to have discussions in this vein, need to make sure they're providing to staff an overview of the grant programs they're interested in. We want to make sure that they provide us an opportunity to evaluate those and provide feedback back. Consideration specifically needs to be given to the potential sponsors, the eligibility, and the respective capacity to develop and administer those programs. There's obviously a little bit of bandwidth here at College Township. There's bandwidth with Clearwater Conservancy. It's a question of how big of the swing are we trying to take on some of these programs. And then finally, specific to spotted lanternfly, there doesn't appear to be an immediate need to move towards any removal of the tree of heaven or any type of spray control program on Mount Nittany, but it wouldn't hurt for us to do further public education effort. Much like that, having that guide that we provided to you tonight, that is an amazing resource. And just essentially utilizing those resources that Penn State Extension has already out there on the street and just expanding that reach, I think has the opportunity to have a pretty good magnitude of impact. And what we would continue to do is, in our role with our property and that of the greater Mount Nittany, is continue to have monitoring and coordination with the Department of Agriculture to ensure that if an infestation does start, that we're proactive, not reactive to that infestation. That way we nip that before it becomes a major issue and damages that resource. With that in mind, really this was a long way of getting you to the point of having the discussion of both Dustin's proposal as well as some of the discussions that are ongoing with the Parks and Rec Committee. And then we're looking to you to provide us some direction as to what you want us to do on our end to move this effort forward. So I will stop there and let you take it.
Very good. Dustin, since you got this ball rolling, having heard Mike's presentation, thoughts?
Yeah, so I really appreciate staff and Mike in presenting this. I think it's good that we talk about holistically, how we come down to this conversation around invasive species, which is the most recent conversation, and the grants that are on the table. So I think it's a good background. However, I urge us as council that maybe perhaps because of the timeliness of the issue, that we turn our attention tonight and discuss more so on the potential grant that has a 7 September timeframe for eligibility, which would guide you more into the email that I sent out on the 3rd of August out to you guys. The spotted lanternfly on this invasive species grant was used as an example. However, it could be used for whatever, as Mike pointed out. And I thought that this was worth a discussion because of our discussion around the sponging off and wanting to spend money on that next year. Perhaps this is a way to get that funded. So it's not just Stony Batter. We actively, I know the Parks and Rec Committee, through a lot of volunteering, actively, and spraying as well from our township folks. We actively are removing invasives in Kissinger Meadow. We actively are looking and doing these type of things. They be plant invasives, but there is opportunity out there. So that being said, I don't know if Steve Spoonmore's in the room. I can't really tell who's in the room.
Yes.
He is.
He could elaborate more on the grant that's on the table. But that's what I'm urging us to really center our conversation around, whether or not that's something that we can pursue at this time, if it's able to be pursued, or whether or not that's something that we're going to have to defer to a later time. In whatever capacity we can get that money. I think the money's somewhere around 250 to 400K.
Okay. At this point, we do have some members of our Parks and Rec Committee, if either
Sure.
would like to speak.
I'd be honored. Thank you, Council. Thank you, Dustin. Steve Spoonamore. Yes, I'm a member of the Park and Rec Commission. I've also worked with the Mellon Foundation previously as a reviewer of their technology grants, so I've served internally at Mellon as a professional, and my wife's been a recipient of one of their fellowships. So we have a long relationship there. Dustin invited me to meet with the Nittany Conservancy people. I did so. We've taken walks together, and they have already asked for me to provide them with a draft letter. They're willing to, if we get the money, to provide access and teaming to remove Tree of Heaven, which itself is an invasive and the primary host of the lanternfly. They're also interested in the spongy moth issues. I've reached back out to Mellon and said, I don't know what entity this comes through. Clearwater Conservancy has also other interests with Mellon. I'm not sure if there's a conflict there or not. And they suggested if we wanted to set up, this is their suggestion, a beneficial public LLC dedicated to inner boundary, because invasive species don't care, between township, Nittany Mountain Conservancy, and other entities in the area, we could apply in that manner. That's where I left it. The application process closes on September 7th. I've worked with Melon before, understand the process, and I offered to get the grant written initially and then either bring it to review for Mike or whoever the designation process works, but I certainly have been down their path before. I know what a winning proposal there looks like, and yes, it's $250,000 is their award. That's
Great.
where, that's
Thank
where
you.
Of course.
Dave Schulte, do you have anything? You're good?
I'm just going to support what Steve said.
Excellent, thank you.
As a general approach to this, the Captain Tree of Heaven seems like a kill two birds with one stone type of approach.
Sure. Council, I'll throw my 2 cents. With the tight window, we need to go with the most experienced entity if we're going to move forward. It sounds like Clearwater would consider this. It sounded like Mount Nittany was agreeable to that.
Yes,
Is that what I mean?
they've said they'll send over.
Please, not from the seat, please. So if we were gonna pursue it, that seemed like a logical. One of the other ones that I thought of potentially was the Parks Authority, because some of this is parkland and stuff, but I don't think they have the experience and expertise to move quickly on this, and certainly don't have the bandwidth. So, Adam, you have thoughts in any which direction for this?
To be frank, I don't know how council, I think council can certainly endorse the concept
Right.
this evening. I think that's different than supporting a grant application to which we may in fact be named. I don't know anything about the grant, and I know that you do. The name of the grant, the criteria for the grant, all of those kinds of things. I think that staff needs an opportunity to review that, and it can be done very quickly, but they need to have an opportunity to review that to ensure that there are no pitfalls. I
Sure.
guess is the
Unintended
best-
consequences,
or
et cetera.
unintended consequences for any of the programs we may be
Right.
involved in, et cetera. But certainly, I would tend to agree, if time is of the essence, and obviously it is, that Clearwater, and given Mike's conversation with Ms. Nardone earlier in the month, would seem to be the likely choice. The fact that we have in-house expertise that's able to write the grant, I think that's outstanding. But I do think that before council can give a full-throated endorsement, I think that staff needs to do a little legwork on your behalf. Again, that's something that can be done, in my opinion, very quickly. But we would need to have those grant details available, be able to review all of those requirements, et cetera, et cetera. All this property, well, at least initially, the property would be within College Township, at least the focal point. Obviously, as you had mentioned, there's already apparent agreement on the part of one or more members, or all the members of the Conservancy to support that. Those kinds of letters need to be in hand, as well as council's support before we would be, I think, even in a position to approach Clearwater with the prospect of being the grant administrator for this. And I think that they'll need some time to take a look at that as well. So I think it's a tall task, but I think it feasibly could be completed by the due date for the grant. But
And our meeting September 1st.
And we meet September 1st. So certainly all the work that I've just identified from a staff perspective can be done certainly by that time, if not before. And I think that we can work on parallel paths with respect to coordinating with Clearwater Conservancy. But there are some details and some specifics that I think that we need to have in order to properly advise council.
Mr. Chair, if I can just jump in and add a caveat to my discussion with Clearwater, it was delivered conceptually, not specifically.
Understood,
So-
understood, but the reality is, if there's not a consensus of council to even pursue this, then there's no reason to have
Correct.
the discussions here. And let's be real too, we're swimming upstream. September 8th is coming quick, and everything. It's not like we don't have anything else going on or anything. So, but 250,000 is 250,000 to deal with an issue that we know we have and could get much, much worse. So I think that's a thing we need to provide staff with a consensus of whether they potentially need to reprioritize some things that they have going on, or are we gonna accept that we're not gonna get this one, when's the next one? And let's be ready for it. So, Eric, any thoughts? Start with you, and we'll just head around.
Regarding the staff recommendations, I'm on board with 1 and 2. We didn't really talk about that, but it sounded like from Dustin's comments that he supports staff recommendations 1 and 2. So it comes to down to 3, which is what
Yeah, Eric, I do, sorry, I wasn't clear on that, I do,
Okay.
yeah.
So it sounds like we're at 3, we have in-house staff expertise. If the associated strings with the grant aren't, too bad, staff has the time to vet that, I think I can support moving forward, assuming that Clearwater, we're talking about Clearwater being, at this point, tentatively the administrator of the grant. Should that fall to the township, does that become a separate discussion?
Well, yes, clearly, I mean,
It
at
was
the
a
moment.
rhetorical question, I think, it was for tonight, because I can't have one meeting without a,
There you go. No, I mean, the reality is I don't think staff has the bandwidth to get this
That
done.
would
Or
be- that would be
expertise,
my-
yeah.
Again, that would be my concern, but I can't even give you that answer until I know more about the
Sure, sure.
grant. And that's one of the,
so,
that's one of the
yes, with those
aspects of my
contingencies,
comment.
Yeah, exploration. That's basically what it is right now, so. Paul?
Yeah, I mean, I think conceptually this makes a lot of sense. I mean, 1 and 2, for sure. As to 3, we're already beginning to do that, looking at potential sponsors, capacity. This grant, there's probably others as well, so let's not just stop here. And, 4 is kind of more of a recommendation, but conceptually, I think this is a great direction to move, and there's no reason that we shouldn't combine some silos that may artificially exist.